For more on all of this, let's bring in Gordon Chang. He's the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, and he's on the phone. You can get him. By the way, you can find him, of course, as always, on the platform formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, good to talk to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Vince.
So it seems like Xi Jinping's the guy with a lot to gain here, and that we're the team with a lot to lose.
Well, certainly, because the more that we talk to China, the longer we delay in taking those measures against China that we should have been imposing a long time ago. You know, we've had these intensive conversations with China for more than 3 decades. And while we do that, you know, we do not defend our country. So, yes, the Chinese love talking. And, you know, you have to ask yourself a question. I mean, what can Biden accomplish now? And what can he say now that he hasn't said over the last 3 decades? So, you know, this is not helping us.
Yeah, the claim is that the two men are going to reach agreements on fentanyl and global warming, which to me seems ridiculous. For one, on the fentanyl front, you know, Biden could get control of our southern border but refuses to, so he's not that serious about fentanyl. And global warming, that always results in life becoming more miserable here, and China benefits, right?
Yes. You know, on fentanyl, you know, we've got to face a horrible reality, and that is we're not dealing with fentanyl gangs. We're dealing with the Communist Party that wants fentanyl to come into the United States to kill Americans. The Communist Party runs a near total surveillance state, which means they know everything that these large, well-organized fentanyl gangs are doing. We don't actually have to speculate because the Chinese officials, they inspect every container that leaves China. Chinese diplomats provide cover to the fentanyl gangs, and the gangs run their money and their proceeds through the Chinese state banking system. So this is the Communist Party, and we're never going to get anywhere just by talking to criminals like Xi Jinping. The only way we're going to get there is if we impose those costs. If, for instance, we start to issue Interpol red notices for the Politburo Standing Committee, including Xi Jinping.
So what do you think of this, of the imagery of Xi Jinping arriving today to San Francisco with Chinese flags waving all over the place to welcome him? Is this the type of event where these images get back to China as a way to bolster his domestic strength?
Yes, absolutely. For instance, when Xi Jinping's predecessor, Hu Jintao, went to a state visit at the White House, what they were looking for were those televised images that they could send back to China. And they're going to do the same thing with all of these Chinese flags that are waving as Xi Jinping passes by. And we got to remember that the Chinese consulate actually organized Chinese students to go to San Francisco to demonstrate, to praise Xi Jinping. We shouldn't be allowing any foreign government to organize expressions of political opinion on American soil.
Least of all China. And, you know, the idea that they're talking about fentanyl and global warming, fentanyl obviously a huge issue, matters a lot, but again, I don't sense any authenticity from Biden on that question. It tells you a great deal, doesn't it, Sir Gordon Chang? Because we're looking at this, and we've got China, as you know, intellectual property theft. We've got espionage everywhere. We have Chinese foreign national college students who are whose families are effectively held ransom in China unless they're also engaged in espionage against the United States. We have TikTok influence campaigns that are destroying an entire generation here in the United States. It seems like everywhere you turn, China is wielding its influence in a way that really hurts the United States.
Yes, because the Communist Party feels the U.S. is an existential threat. It feels that way not because of anything we say or do, Vince, but because of who we are. Because an insecure regime in Beijing is worried about the inspirational impact of American values and form of governance on the Chinese people, which means we will never have amicable relations with China as long as the Communist Party rules it. And we have to acknowledge that. And so far, you don't have Democrats or Republicans, liberals or conservatives, willing to go to acknowledge what China is doing and to actually be willing to impose those costs on China, which have to be severe.
Well, and the reason for that is because we become so economically dependent on them, right?
That's one big factor. It's also for the factor you mentioned that China spends enormous amounts of money and effort to try to influence American elites and ordinary Americans to support Communist Party narratives. And unfortunately, we have members of both parties who, for various reasons, do repeat Communist Party talking points. I'm not saying they're communists, but they actually say those things that the Communist Party wants them to.
How much risk are we in today with Joe Biden meeting with Xi Jinping? Are you concerned about what might go on behind closed doors?
I'm already concerned about what they've announced. So, for instance, they've announced that they're going to sign an agreement on artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons. And yes, it's a bad thing for weapons to be controlled by AI, but the problem is the agreement that they're going to sign, like 99.9999% will be unenforceable. So that means we will adhere to it and China won't, which means that China will get a very large advantage in warfare. So we shouldn't be signing any agreement with China unless we can be sure that we can enforce it. And an AI agreement, because, China's not going to let us into their nuclear weapons facilities to read tens of millions of lines of code.
Right.
So this really is dangerous.
Also, China is sending a lot of money to all of the world's authoritarians, especially those dictators that sell energy. So while we are kneecapping our own energy supply, China is buying up a tremendous amount of energy from places like Russia and Iran and funding these war machines that are causing so much trouble, aren't they, Gordon Chang?
Well, certainly. When you look at Iran, for the first 9 months of this year, China's purchases of Iranian oil was 60% above that in 2017. 2017 is important, Vince, because that was the last year before the Trump administration reimposed sanctions on the purchase of Iranian oil. So essentially, China has been financing the war against Israel.
Yes, and as a result, a bunch of American troops have been injured as well as Iran and its proxies keep firing on us.
Absolutely, and one American contractor was killed. We should be getting not only the Iranian proxies, we should be going after Iran itself. And a friend of mine in the Middle East is saying that one of the things that Xi Jinping is going to say today to Joe Biden is to demand that we leave Iran alone. That's the last thing we should be doing. We should be making sure that Iran never sells another drop of oil because, look, they've been attacking us. These are acts of war. And Biden sort of thinks, oh, let's just have 3 separate airstrikes, which mean nothing to Iran or the proxies.
Yeah. Also, if we just increased our own energy production meaningfully, we wouldn't have to spend so much time attacking everybody else. It's like I think it makes a lot of sense, but we don't do that. Why not?
Well, it's because there's a leftist ideology. When the Trump administration came into office, the idea was that the U.S. would ramp up energy production, which would not only make us self-sufficient so we wouldn't be held hostage to any regime in the world, but also that we would be able to sell hydrocarbons around the world and exert leverage because of that. That's a great plan. It actually was working until Biden came in and decided, no, we shouldn't be extracting oil and gas in the U.S. We should be buying it from Venezuela. Huh?
Yeah, it's mentally ill, honestly, and very destructive. But it goes right along with what China desires for us to do, which is to be self-destructive at their encouragement. What do you know anything, Gordon Chang, about how much China continues to cooperate militarily with some of these other authoritarian countries? We've had some reporting in the past about joint military exercises between China and places like North Korea and Iran and Russia. Is that still an active military and growing relationship?
Well, yes. China is exercising with Russia at an increased pace, also with North Korea and with Iran. But China's also been selling weapons. The weapons that the Houthis have been using, those come from China. We know that because in 2021 and this year, the U.S. Navy interdicted shipments of Chinese weapons to Yemen. Also, we know that Hamas has Chinese weapons, which presumably came from Iran, and Hamas has North Korean weapons, and those North Korean weapons could not have been sold into the Middle East without China's approval.
Yes. Yeah. North Korea is a kind of a weird thing because of all the sanctions on North Korea, I understand that a lot of ships that float into North Korea, bringing supplies, often do it with false flags. They fly various flags in order to justify why they're bringing all these goods to North Korea. That has to be all done with China's permission, right?
Yes, and they also drop shipment in the middle of the ocean. They turn off their transponders. The issue here is, yes, the Chinese and the North Koreans are villains, but we know all of this is going on and we permit it. So this is on us. This is, for instance, on Biden, and it was also on Biden's predecessors. They all knew this was going on. They didn't stop it. This is something the American people should be angry at their own presidents, as well as those guys in China and Iran and North Korea.
Gordon Chang, my suspicion, and I want to see if it's yours as well, is that Xi Jinping does want President Biden to be in office again, and that he will do what he can to get him reelected, I would assume. Do you agree? Is that something that you're looking out for? Do you expect the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, to begin exerting some sort of pressure on the United States to make it so that Biden can be reelected here?
Well, certainly China supported Biden over Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries in the last round, and then supported Biden over Trump. I think that China's going to wait to see who the Republicans nominate, because there are a few Republicans I think that China would actually like over Joe Biden. But, you know, if it were Trump versus Biden, you can be sure China will do everything to make sure that Biden gets reelected.
And when you say everything, you mean fully meddling in our election?
Completely, like they did last time, making donations, propaganda support, God knows what else through social media. TikTok is going to become a Democratic Party tool. Just down the line, that will occur. And we know it because they did it in the past. We didn't stop them. So, again, this is something that is on us.
It sure is. All right. Well, at any rate, Gordon Chang, thank you as always for your expertise on this visit by Xi Jinping to the United States. I really appreciate your time today, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Vince, because I really appreciate it.
Of course. It's Gordon Chang, and you can find him on Twitter, now X, at Gordon G. Chang.